In the 19th century, England expands its reach into the global trade, bringing silks and spices from distant colonies. But amidst these treasures, they unknowingly transport a far darker commodity, the zombie virus. Before long, the country is overrun with these monstrous creatures. Millions fall, only to rise again, consumed by an insatiable hunger for brains. As the chaos spreads, the surviving citizens begin to study deadly arts from the Far East, learning combat techniques from China and Japan. In a desperate attempt to contain the epidemic, the government constructs the Grand Barrier, a towering 100-foot wall encircling London. To further secure the city, they dig the Royal Canal, a deep, ominous trench that surrounds both the city and its protective wall. The desolate stretch of land between the wall and the canal comes to be known as the In-Between. In the wake of the Second Battle of Kent, a breach in one of the bridges across the canal allows the zombies to flood into the In-Between, wiping out the villagers there. The gruesome loss drives the king to madness. Once the battle subsides, he orders the destruction of all bridges except for one. Soon, lords and ladies abandon London, retreating to their fortified estates. Colonel Darcy arrives at one such estate in Hertfordshire County after hearing rumors of a person infected by the virus. At the entrance, a guard checks his identification and leads him through a narrow tunnel to a priest who inspects his body, ensuring he's not bitten. Finally, Darcy is allowed into the house, where Mrs. Featherstone plays cards with her friends. She assures Darcy that there are no infected individuals in her home, claiming that no zombies have entered her estate for years. Feigning interest in a card game, Darcy joins the table and uncorks a vial filled with carrying flies. He releases them into the room, explaining that they can detect the presence of decaying flesh. The flies buzz briefly before settling on a man, signaling that he is in the early stages of zombification. Without hesitation, Darcy smashes his glass and drives his blade into the man's face, decapitating him swiftly. Afterward, Darcy asks if the man could have infected anyone else in the house. Mrs. Featherstone insists no one else is at risk. Darcy then kicks the severed head across the room, scandalizing the guests as he makes his exit. However, Featherstone's daughter, unwilling to lie any longer, rushes upstairs to check on the infected man's niece. Tragically, it's too late. The girl has already turned, and she attacks the staff before setting her sights on Featherstone's daughter. Meanwhile, Mr. Bennet has been rigorously training his 5 daughters in every conceivable weapon and martial art, preparing them to defend themselves against the undead. Yet, his wife, Mrs. Bennet, disapproves, urging her daughters to focus on securing marriage prospects. When she hears of an upcoming dance, she convinces her husband to let them attend as a much-needed reprieve. All the sisters are thrilled, save for Elizabeth, who has no patience for such social affairs. They don their finest dresses, making sure to discreetly hide weapons within the folds of their gowns. At the event, Bingley, lost in conversation with Darcy, freezes upon seeing Jane. Struck by love at first sight, he immediately asks her to dance, and the two enjoy themselves thoroughly. Afterward, Bingley encourages Darcy to join the dance and suggests he ask Elizabeth. Darcy, however, dismisses her as tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt him. Elizabeth overhears this and storms off, only to awkwardly knock over a bottle, embarrassing herself in front of the guests. Once outside, she bursts into tears, but her sobs are interrupted by Featherstone, now a zombie. Though still able to speak, Featherstone attempts to relay something to Elizabeth, but Darcy ends her misery with a swift shot to the head. The shot draws the attention of others, and soon a zombie appears, prompting the guards to ring the bell, signaling an attack. While most of the guests scramble for safety, the Bennet sisters unsheath their weapons and engage the zombies without hesitation. Their blades find their mark, their kicks precise and deadly. Darcy, watching Elizabeth fight, finds himself inexplicably drawn to her. When the battle ends, the zombie bodies are set ablaze. As the sisters head home, Jane can't stop gushing about Bingley, while Elizabeth stews over Darcy's arrogance and pride, which only sharpens her focus during her training, making her movements all the more ruthless. The following day, Jane receives an invitation for tea with Bingley. Mrs. Bennet, ever scheming, insists she take a horse instead of a coach, hoping that if it rains, Jane will be forced to stay the night. During her journey, Jane is nearly attacked by a zombie after a pack of dogs rushes by, followed closely by the creature. As Jane prepares to defend herself, her horse bolts, throwing her to the ground. She attempts to fire her musket, but the weapon backfires, injuring her hand. When the zombie lunges at her, Jane unsheathes her knife, expertly slicing off its hands and slashing its legs. With one final kick to its chest, she delivers the fatal blow, stomping on its head. As rain begins to pour, she spots a zombie mother carrying an infected baby, closing in on her. The next day, Elizabeth arrives at Bingley's house, where she learns that Jane has been ill with the flu and had spent the night there, battling a fever. Elizabeth came to check on her. Yet, Darcy, ever the skeptic, fears Jane might be infected. As a doctor examines her, Darcy releases his carrying flies into the room. The tiny insects remain perfectly still around Jane, much to Elizabeth's amusement. With a grin, she catches them in her hand, crushing them in her fist before handing them back to Darcy with a biting remark. Once Jane is feeling better, she joins Bingley and his guests, but politely declines their invitation to play cards, preferring instead to read. An argument erupts over what truly defines a real woman, and Darcy finds himself torn between admiration and disdain for Elizabeth's boldness. That evening, Elizabeth sneaks a glance at Darcy as he trains outdoors, his movements precise and deadly. The next day, Mrs. Bennet arrives to collect both Jane and Elizabeth, but Bingley, reluctant to see them leave, urges them to stay. Darcy, ever cautious, reminds him of the dangers of the infection. A tense argument ensues between Darcy and Elizabeth, during which he reveals that he knows she watched him train the night before. To placate everyone, Mrs. Bennet convinces Bingley to host a ball, hoping it will lift spirits. On their way home, the sisters spot the remains of the local orphanage, now overrun by the zombie orphans who wander the woods. Later, Mr. Bennet introduces the family to Cousin Collins, the heir to their estate upon Mr. Bennet's death, since women are not allowed to inherit. During lunch, Collins boasts of his connection to Lady Catherine, an extraordinary swordswoman who played a crucial role during the zombie war. He quickly shows interest in Jane. Afterward, the family heads out to visit their aunt, but they are stopped on the road by the sight of a fallen carriage and a woman's desperate cries for help. The sisters draw their weapons, and when the woman emerges, they open fire. She's a zombie. Jane ends her life with a powerful kick, sending the creature tumbling down the hill. As they continue on their journey, Elizabeth struggles with the weight of the weapons she carries, but Collins, ever oblivious, simply puts them back in her arms instead of offering to help. When they arrive in town, they notice the arrival of new soldiers who will be stationed to protect the area. Elizabeth meets Lieutenant Wickham, and the two quickly hit it off. Darcy, watching from a distance, feels a pang of jealousy and walks away without a word. Wickham shares that he and Darcy have a history of bad blood, stemming from unresolved family issues over money. That night, at the ball, Jane spends her time with Bingley, while Elizabeth attempts to engage Wickham in conversation. However, Collins eagerly drags her onto the dance floor, his energy bordering on ridiculous enthusiasm. Darcy, seeing Elizabeth caught in Collins' overzealous embrace, approaches her and asks for a dance. Yet, Collins awkwardly intercedes, causing the two to walk away. As Darcy exits, he overhears Mrs. Bennet loudly discussing Jane's future with Bingley, repeatedly emphasizing Bingley's wealth. Meanwhile, Elizabeth stumbles upon Bingley, and, just as they are about to talk, they hear a commotion. Turning around, they spot a servant being attacked by a zombie. Grabbing nearby axes, they rush downstairs, but the zombie grabs Bingley and throws him to the ground. Without hesitation, Elizabeth slides in, knocking the creature off balance before checking on her friend. But when she looks up, she realizes they are surrounded by a group of zombie orphans. She asks one of the children how they managed to get in. At that moment, Darcy bursts into the room, slashing through the zombies with swift, precise movements of his blade. One unlucky zombie is even shoved into the oven. Darcy then turns to Bingley, questioning if he was bitten, preparing to end his life to prevent infection. Elizabeth reassures him that Bingley merely fell, not bitten. Before Darcy leaves, Elizabeth tells him he's a remarkable warrior, but a terrible friend. The next day, Jane receives a letter from Bingley, explaining that his family is returning to London and that he plans to court Darcy's sister instead. At lunch, Collins, with an air of smug certainty, asks Elizabeth to marry him, though it comes with a troubling condition. She must give up her weapons and cease fighting zombies. Elizabeth, feeling both repelled and insulted, immediately refuses. She storms outside, her frustration burning through her as she trains in the yard. Mrs. Bennet chastises her for rejecting such an advantageous match, But Mr. Bennet, to Elizabeth's relief, supports her decision. Elizabeth hugs her father in gratitude, but her mother's constant nagging drives her to retreat into the woods for some peace. In the quiet of the forest, Elizabeth notices a strange sight, a flock of birds flying overhead, circling 4 men in top hats. Just then, Wickham approaches, and when Elizabeth turns back, the men are gone. Wickham, a glint of mischief in his eyes, says he didn't see anything before inviting her to a secret place. Moments later, they arrive at a church where a priest is in the middle of delivering a sermon. But as the crowd turns to face the altar, Elizabeth's heart skips a beat. Every one of them is a zombie. Wickham quickly stops her from grabbing her weapons, and they stand in silence as they watch the priest feed the zombies pig brains. It turns out that the infected don't fully transform into mindless zombies if they don't consume human brains. Wickham believes this could be the key to finding a way for zombies and humans to coexist. Elizabeth, intrigued but cautious, agrees, suggesting they take this idea to the crown. However, Wickham reveals the hard truth: the war has nearly bankrupted the country, and he has no one left to turn to for help. Sometime later, a friend of Elizabeth's informs her that she's now engaged to Collins and asks Elizabeth to accompany her as a chaperone to meet the in-laws. At Collins' estate, Elizabeth finds herself amused by a painting depicting Lady Catherine slaying Lucifer. There's also a disturbing piece of art depicting the 4 horsemen of the zombie apocalypse, who are said to appear when the end is near. Elizabeth realizes that these are the men she saw in the woods. Then, to her surprise, she meets Lady Catherine and her daughter, and to her even greater shock, Darcy is there too, revealed as Catherine's nephew. Wickham arrives shortly after, as Elizabeth invited him so he could ask for the money needed to fund his plan. Catherine, however, dismisses the idea of befriending zombies as utterly ridiculous, stating that they would never follow a leader. Collins, eager to prove himself useful, points out that the Bible prophesies that the Antichrist will lead the undead. Darcy, supporting his aunt's opinion, becomes enraged when Wickham mentions his father and orders the guards to throw him out. Elizabeth, disgusted, tells Darcy that he's as unfeeling as the zombies they fight. That night, Darcy spends hours outside, battling his own anger through training. Elizabeth, unable to sleep due to her friend's loud snoring, sneaks out into the garden, where she finds Wickham. He tells her that Darcy drove the Bingley family away by convincing them that Jane was only after their money. Wickham then proposes they run away together, but Elizabeth refuses. Before leaving, he ominously reminds her that the day of reckoning is fast approaching. The next day, Darcy approaches Elizabeth, telling her that while he considers her inferior, he's still attracted to her and wants her to marry him. Elizabeth, seething with frustration, turns him down immediately, calling him out for what he did to Jane and Bingley. Darcy defends his actions, leading to a furious exchange. Elizabeth, not holding back her anger, kicks him and throws several objects at him before picking up a poker and attacking him. Darcy quickly defends himself, and the two end up in a compromising position on the table. Their argument turns into an all-out fight, exchanging blow after blow until they find themselves in yet another awkward stance. Elizabeth declares that she will never marry him, and Darcy, finally defeated, leaves. Elizabeth, heartbroken and furious, breaks down. Later, Elizabeth receives a letter from Darcy, explaining his actions. He writes that he never intended to hurt Jane and only sent Bingley away to protect him from Mrs. Bennet's manipulation. He also explains that he was forced to kill his own father when he turned into a zombie, but still gave Wickham the money that was promised. However, Wickham kept demanding more and grew enraged when Darcy refused. Wickham even tried to marry Darcy's teenage sister for the money, but Darcy intervened just in time to save her. Darcy ends the letter by acknowledging Elizabeth's feelings for him, stating that he will now focus on the latest zombie attacks in London, believing someone must be orchestrating the chaos since the attacks have become too coordinated. When Elizabeth returns home, she's horrified to discover that Wickham has run away with Lydia, the youngest sister. She quickly surmises that Wickham must have taken Lydia to the special place to offer her as a sacrifice to the zombies. Desperate to stop them, she races out to find them. On her way, Darcy meets her halfway, telling her about rumors of a new zombie cult centered around Bingley's house. Elizabeth, determined to help, agrees to join him in tracking down Lydia, though Darcy insists it's too dangerous. Finally, relenting, he agrees to let her come. After tracking them to the woods, they find Wickham and Lydia standing ready to offer her to the undead. Darcy and Elizabeth spring into action, slaying the zombies before saving Lydia. Elizabeth, breathless from the fight, tells Darcy that she can't forgive him for all the pain he's caused, but admits that she might change her mind in time. In the end, they form a new partnership, battling side by side to bring an end to the war between zombies and humans, gaining a grudging respect for one another as they continue to fight for survival.